وذكر فإن الذكرى تنفع المؤمنين.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulihil Ameen wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Amma ba'd. And welcome and thank you for tuning in to Signs of the Hour. I'm your host, Kamal El Mekki, and we're talking about the Mahdi. If you remember last episode, we spoke extensively for a good while about the Mahdi. And then I promised that this episode we're going to talk about some of the false Mahdis that have risen throughout the ages. So let's start with this hadith here. The Prophet ﷺ, this is in Sahih Muslim, said, يَعُوذُ عَائِذٌ بِالْبَيْتِ. Ya'udhu, just like when you say a'udhu billah, you seek refuge, you seek the protection. So ya'udhu a'idhun bil bayt, so someone seeks the protection with the house, meaning the Kaaba in Mecca. Or the more correct translation, a person will seek refuge at the house, meaning the Kaaba in Mecca. فَيُبْعَثْ إِلَيْهِ بَعْث. So an army will be sent to him, meaning sent to kill him. So فَيُبْعَثْ إِلَيْهِ بَعْث فَإِذَا كَانُوا بِبَيْدَاء مِنَ الْأَرْضِ. So when they reached the open ground, okay, and then an area called al-Bayda, which is just an open area, open space with no houses in it, خُسِفَ بِهِمْ. The earth will swallow that army up. Alright, so someone seeks protection at the house, and then an army is sent to destroy him, and when they reach this open area of Bayda, the earth will swallow up that army. قِيلَ يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ. To the companions, they asked, Ya Rasulullah, فَكَيْفَ بِمَنْ كَانَ كَارِهًا. What about those that were coerced to be part of that army? So the earth swallows up the whole army. Not everybody's a bad guy there. What about those who were forced to come out with this army? They didn't want to, but they're just compelled. They say, okay, I'm going to go, but I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to hurt anybody. And then when they get to this open area, the earth swallows them up. What about these people? قال يخسف به معهم ولكنه يبعث يوم القيامة على نيته. The Prophet ﷺ said he will be swallowed up. The earth will swallow him up as well. He will be swallowed up with them, but he will be resurrected on the day of resurrection, on the Yawm al-Qiyamah, based on his niyyah, based on his intention. So those who went there with ill intent, who intent to kill and do this and that, they'll be resurrected based on their intention. And then others who went there because they were forced to, but they didn't want to harm anybody, they'll be resurrected on the Day of Judgment based on their intention as well. We said if you put them all together, you get a more complete picture of the story of the Mahdi. Which, I'll tell you something interesting. When you put them all together, you see a story that makes sense chronologically, the events make sense, it's a complete story. You understand? You know, like when you have, let's say, 10 people, and each one of them just by themselves gives one part of a story, and then you put it all together. Is it going to be coherent? Is it going to make sense? The answer is no. What am I really saying here? There were some people, some of the contemporary, I'm not going to call them scholars, but just, speakers, all right? And this is like in the Arab land specifically. And a lot of them challenged the story or the authenticity or even the idea of the Mahdi. Even though we have authentic ahadith, we have weak ahadith and we have plenty of authentic hadith that speak about the Mahdi and his coming and everything. They said, no, this stuff was just put together, it was fabricated, it was not, it was just glued together, made up by people who were deviant and people who were intending to scare and terrify the ummah. Then how do we have such a story, a complete story with no contradictions? That's the real question. If random people with bad intentions throughout the ummah faked these ahadith about the Mahdi, then the story wouldn't make any sense. It wouldn't have a beginning, middle, and end. It would just be, okay, one time the Mahdi is here, one time he's over there, but that's not the case. It's something to think about. All right. Now, last time, one of the things also we wanted to mention, this is an authentic narration again, and by the way, another argument they made is that none of the hadith of the Mahdi are in Sahih Muslim or Sahih Bukhari. Alright, what's the problem? These are not the only authentic books of hadith. The example I have here, this is an authentic narration from Sunan Abi Dawood. The Prophet ﷺ mentions that a Khalifa dies. then a civil war will break out. So a person from my Ahlul Bayt will leave Medina running away from it to Mecca. Okay? So what do we have so far? We have a Khalifa that dies. So there's got to be a Khilafah, and then the Khalifa dies. Then there's a civil war. Another hadith says 3 sons of a Khalifa. They pull the Ummah into the civil war, the likes of which the Ummah has never seen. So a person from my Ahlul Bayt, from my family, meaning from my lineage, shall leave Medina, running away from it to Mecca. From Medina to Mecca. And the fact that he was running away, the scholars mentioned that it indicates that he was targeted, that someone was interested in him or had something about him. So they were looking at him carefully and he's targeted, so they sent someone or a group after him. So he leaves Medina and he goes to Mecca, and he shall reach the Kaaba, and people will force him out of his house. Remember what I said last time? People force him to give the bay'ah. Whereas everyone who claims that they're the Mahdi and you should follow them, they're asking you for the bay'ah. He doesn't want it. They force him out of his house and give him bay'ah between the rukn, the black stone, and the maqam of Ibrahim. So right in that area, he will stand and people will force him to accept the bay'ah. Then the Prophet ﷺ mentions, then Muslims from Khurasan will go to join him. And he says, when you see the army, give bay'ah to the Mahdi. Okay. Well, the hadith mentions that if you see him, if you know and hear of the Mahdi, get to him and crawl, even if you have to crawl over snow, to give the pledge to him. All right. He says, I saw in a dream something very strange. The Prophet ﷺ mentions this hadith. I saw in a dream something very strange. A group of people from my ummah will intend to attack the Kaaba because a man from my descendants has sought refuge in it. It's very similar to the other ones, just seeing it from a different angle. As the army is camped at Bayda, Allah will cause the earth to open up and swallow the army. Okay. So let's do a quick recap here. Combining the narrations together, we see that the Mahdi will seek refuge in the Kaaba. There will be some political turmoil, civil war. He leaves Medina to go to Mecca. And when an army is sent to destroy him while he's in Mecca, and then while they're at this open area of Bayda, the earth will swallow them up. And then he will lead, then people will give him bay'ah between the black stone and the maqam of Ibrahim. Then people will, we said unanimously, and just everyone will know this is the Mahdi. There will not be, people on the sidelines, righteous people. Is that him or not? Everybody will start to give pledge to him. And when you hear of him, you have to make sure you go cross whatever distance and you pledge to the Mahdi. He will lead the entire ummah, and the whole ummah will be united, and this will be the greatest khilafah ever, as some scholars said. He will give money to everyone, and he will, there will be peace, and there will be, safety and all that for the first time in a long time. In Sunnah Abu Dawood, the Prophet ﷺ mentions يَمْلِكُ سَبْعْ سِنِينَ. He will rule for 7 years. And then the Dajjal comes. So all this happens, and then the Dajjal comes during the time of the Mahdi. And the Mahdi then, even though he knows he cannot kill the Dajjal, he puts together an army and they fight against him on day 1. Now, with the Dajjal and stuff, of course, we're going to get to all these details when we get to the Dajjal. But our point today was the Mahdi. And then, so they have a fierce battle against the army of the Dajjal. Then on that, so they go to sleep at night. That morning, that Fajr, they make the Iqamah. And right before the Mahdi, moves forward to lead the Salah, all the believers, they look up and they see Isa alayhi salam, Isa ibn Maryam coming down. And the Prophet ﷺ specifically mentioned with one hand on the wing of one angel, the other hand on the wing of another angel. He describes the garment he'll be wearing, its color, his hair, what it looks like, and he comes down right amongst the believers. And so they rush to him. They rush to Isa alayhi salam, and he wipes over their faces and he tells them their rank, their place in Al-Jannah. And then Al-Mahdi tells Isa ibn Maryam, تَقَدَّمْ يَا رُوحَ اللَّهِ. But Isa ibn Maryam pushes him from his shoulder like this, and he tells him the Iqamah was made for you. Now, a number of things here. One, why is that? Why does the Mahdi lead the great Prophet Isa alayhi salam? Because number one, the scholars mention that the Mahdi has the Qur'an. And Isa alayhi salam has the Injil. And which one is superior? No doubt it is the Qur'an. Two, they said to indicate that he's not coming as a new prophet. Rather, he is coming as a follower of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. That's why some scholars said something interesting about Isa alayhi salam. They said this actually makes him a companion as well, because he saw the Prophet sallam. How? During the ascension journey, he met the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and of course believed in him as a prophet. And so in that sense, he fits the bill of being a companion, a sahabi. I said that in class one time, and a student put their hand up and said, okay, and the people who see Isa, do they become the tabi'een? And of course, the answer is no. But also, so those are the two reasons. The third one is that also as respect, that this man assembled this whole army and he is leading them, and they already made the iqamah for him, so as respect, he let him lead. And what's interesting is, after this point, we do not have a single word about the Mahdi after this. Not a single word about the Mahdi. We don't know if he lives until the time of Isa alayhi salam, continues living and just goes into retirement, has children, gets married. We don't know if he dies. We don't know anything about him after that. And the explanation is now the real star, Isa alayhi salam, has shown. So at that point, really nobody cares about the Mahdi. There's no comparison between a Mahdi and a prophet, and a Mahdi and one of the 5 greatest prophets of Allah at that. So, but since we're more or less kind of done with the Mahdi, let's look at some other quote-unquote Mahdis that have shown up in history. All right. There was, let's start with what we mentioned last time, that some of the Rafidis, what they used to be called back then, today we call them the Shia, claimed that the Mahdi is the last of their 12 Imams. So these are the 12er Shias. The Mahdi is the last of the 12 Imams, and his name will be Muhammad ibn al-Hasan al-Askari. And they believe he's from the descendants of al-Hussein, not al-Hasan, as we Sunnis believe. They believe that he entered the tunnel of Samarra in the year 260 after the Hijrah. Yani, the Mahdi was alive. So, in the Sunni belief that if you're not living at the time of the Mahdi, he's not born. And if 500 years ago, the Mahdi was not born. We don't believe that he's alive on earth and hiding somewhere. But these people here, they said that he went into this cave in Samarra in 260 after the Hijrah. So he was alive, went into that cave, and he's not going to come out until it's time to come out. One very important thing to remember when you do something like that or extreme Sufis who say Al-Khadr, the Prophet Al-Khadr who met with Musa alayhi salam, is still alive. When you say the Mahdi is alive and well, or the Al-Khadr is still alive and amongst us, or like some extremists also say the Prophet ﷺ is still alive and he was here and he prayed with us and all that. I'll tell you a story. There was one of the shuyukh that I studied with. He was in Medina. He said, and after the salah, we prayed there, and after the salah, I saw someone turn towards the Prophet ﷺ and make dua. He said the guy was a redhead, so I thought he was a Westerner. So I went to speak to him. So when I got to him, it turns out he's Arab, just looks like that. And he said that, I told him, Ya akhi, we should always make our dua to Allah Azza wa Jalla and to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. Do not pray to anyone else, no intercessors, nothing. And because, as you know, the Prophet ﷺ has passed on. And he tells him, no, the Prophet ﷺ is not dead. The Prophet ﷺ is amongst us, and he actually just prayed Isha with us. So, what do you say to someone like that? So the Shaykh just said, the Prophet ﷺ just prayed Isha with us? He said, yeah. He said, then why don't you make sure that he led the Salah? Makes sense, right? Like, who is going to lead the Salah and the Prophet ﷺ is in line somewhere? No, you stowy. So, anyways, the point is that there are these people who believe the Prophet ﷺ is alive and they try to make it look like it's an honor. But what you're doing, let's pick any here, the Mahdi, the Al-Khadr, and Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If you say any of these three are alive, and like the Shia say, the Mahdi even knows what's happening on earth right now, then is this a plus or a minus? It's a huge negative, it's a huge minus to be alive and see all the destruction and all the death that's happening to the Muslims. Muslims are dying by the millions. By the millions. And you're just sitting there and you're not saying a word. Al-Khadr, what is he doing? Every time in Sudan, every few months, they write an article in the newspaper that they saw Al-Khadr in the vegetable market in this city or that city. And he's always at the vegetable markets because he's Khadr, green, vegetables, green. So you tell me, millions of people died in Iraq and he's just walking around the vegetable garden, vegetable market with some lifts and مش radishes. Doesn't make any sense. It makes the person careless. Tell me the Prophet ﷺ is alive. Let's consult the Prophet ﷺ on all the thousands of problems afflicting the Ummah right now. Not just wars, economies, everything. Doesn't make any sense. Or the Mahdi is alive. What are you waiting for? And he goes to a cave 1,000 years ago. What do you do in a cave? They're punching bags and training in that cave or what? Doesn't make any sense. It takes away from the greatness of the individual when you make them alive and careless. Right? Anyways. Now what's funny is they believe that when he entered the tunnel, he was the cave. He was 5 years old. So like a 5-year-old just walking to a cave is like, okay, see you in 1,000 years. I'm going to stay here for a while. Like even a 5-year-old, like as an adult going in, khalas, you contemplate, you make dhikr. A 5-year-old, what does a 5-year-old know aslan to prepare? Anyways, that was some belief about the Mahdi. Others, there was a man who said by the name of Abdullah ibn Saba, and he claimed that Ali ibn Abi Talib was the awaited Mahdi. And poor Ali radiallahu anhu, they said he was the Mahdi. Alright, they said he was supposed to be not the Khalifa, the Prophet. Then they said, astaghfirullah, some group during his lifetime said he was Allah, astaghfirullah. Then some people said he was the Dabba. The Dabba is the beast that comes towards the end of time. We're going to talk about it inshallah. They said he was the Dabba. And the scholars argue there's never a time ever in the Arabic language when you refer to a human being as a Dabba. But they're just trying to make Ali radiallahu anhu everything. The third, this man by the name of Mukhtar ibn Ubaid al-Thaqafi, he claimed that Muhammad ibn Hanafiya was the Mahdi. Of course, Muhammad ibn Hanafiya never said that. But we kind of mentioned that last time. We said Muhammad ibn Hanafiya was the son of Ali ibn Abi Talib, but not from Fatima, from another woman. Her name was Khawla bintu Ja'far. Khawla bintu Ja'far, she was his mother. And she was from Banu Hanifa, so she was known as Al-Hanafiya, so he became known as Muhammad, the son of Al-Hanafi. Of course, he was a righteous man. He never claimed to be the Khalifa, but or this man specifically, said he was the Khalifa. Then we have a man who was given the nickname Muhammad the Nafs al-Zakiyya. His name was Muhammad ibn Abdullah ibn al-Hasan ibn Ali ibn Abi Talib. So this was the son of al-Hasan, alright? And his name is Muhammad ibn Abdullah. Now, what's interesting here is that, look at the name, Muhammad ibn Abdullah, and then he is from the lineage of al-Hasan, and he's Ibn Abdullah ibn al-Hasan, immediately Ibn Ali. Very close, the lineage is right there, but too soon, don't you think? Like just a few generations later, it's the Mahdi and the Dajjal supposed to come, like it's supposed to be the end of time that quickly, right? What did I tell you in the beginning of this series? People are always guilty of thinking all the signs are going to happen in their world, in their lifetime. All right. So he was actually a very righteous person who was a devout worshiper and always praying and worshiping. And he led a revolt, and this was a very popular revolt of Muhammad the Nafs Zakiyya. He tried to overthrow the Umayyads, right? No, I think the Abbasids. Sorry, he tried to overthrow the Abbasids. Why? Because one of the things is that Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah used to very much support him verbally, monetarily. He wanted him to overthrow them because the Abbasids were being very unjust and very unfair to Ahl al-Bayt, the family of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Anyways, without going on for too long, Muhammad the Nafs Zakiyya, he rebelled against the Abbasid Khalifa al-Mansur, and the rebellion failed, but many people started saying, or were saying, that he was the Mahdi, and of course, clearly he wasn't. There was another individual. This man, his name was Ubaidullah ibn Maymun, and he was, they mentioned that his grandfather was Jewish. He was the leader of the Qaramita, and I told you about the Qaramita, if you remember the episode when we spoke about the destruction and of the stealing the black stone, killing the Hujjaj, and all that stuff that happened by the Qaramita. And they also said, that he was the Mahdi. And they falsely claimed that he belonged to Ahlul Bayt, like they basically, what's the word? Like they faked his lineage to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now we have this one. His name was, he's famous as Ibn Tumart. Ibn Tumart, all right, and his name was Muhammad ibn Abdullah al-Barbari. So he was from the Berber, not an Arab, and that's why he's known as Ibn Tumart. And he appeared in the year 512 or 513 or 14 after the Hijrah. And it was, first of all, he claimed to be a descendant from Ali ibn Abi Talib. And he actually traveled for a while and sought knowledge and became, fairly knowledgeable. But he also picked up from the Khawarij, the takfir, if you commit a major sin, you've left Islam. And he became very, very relaxed with blood, with executions, very relaxed with Muslim blood. And he was very strict even with his own followers. He had a rule that his followers, those who believed in him and followed him, they have to make qiyam every night. And if they don't, they get whipped in the morning. And he employed a number of very dirty tricks. He tricked people in very dirty ways to prove to them that he can do something out of the ordinary so that they can believe he's something special. So one of the things he would do is that he would come, he'd bring his followers, and they would dig graves in the cemetery. And then they would bury his friends. So, your friend's going to help you out here. So we've got 6 friends. We dig 6 graves. Then we put them in. And we, not very, kind of a shallow grave. We cover it. But we cover it. Real grave, right? Yeah, maybe it wasn't that shallow. They cover it really well. Then he goes to the market. And he tells people that I will show you a miracle. He'll just come and bring a whole crowd from the marketplace. And then he'll bring him out to the cemetery. And he'll stand there. And he'll tell people, "Oh dead ones, oh deceased, respond to my call." And then his friends from inside, they yell, "You are al-Mahdi, you are the Mahdi, the awaited Mahdi." So people are standing there, and then they hear, like from these different graves, people are speaking. They'll go to this grave, 2 graves here, and 2 people said, "You are the awaited Mahdi." He'll go over there, "Oh deceased ones, speak to me. You are the awaited Mahdi." They go to another group. It's like, do that a number of times, right? Now here's the thing. Now he has to let his followers out, right? He has to get them out of there because they helped him in this. But if he gets them out, then people come back to show their friends. "We stood right here, he did it. I heard a sound from this grave." Then they look at the ground and they see that the earth has been moved again, and like the grave has been basically exhumed and then recovered. They'll figure out what he was doing. So out of fear of risking that, he would actually just leave his followers there. He would just leave them to die. Really evil, really wicked, but at the same time, he's deviant, they're deviant, so I don't know if they got what they deserved or not. But then there was another person who claimed to be the Mahdi. He claimed to be the Mahdi when he was 38 years old, Muhammad Ahmad ibn Abdullah, and he was from Sudan. And this was, recently basically, when, in like around 1885 basically, when he was, because a number of issues. Number one, he said he was the Mahdi. He was 38 years old, as I said. But one of the things, like he also changed, for example, he added to the 5 pillars or changed the Shahada around. And he said anyone who doubted that he's a Mahdi becomes a kafir, becomes a disbeliever. And it's obviously clear that he was not the Mahdi. If he did anything good, is that he did fight and help expel the British people out of Sudan. So we'll give him that credit because anyone who gets the British out of anywhere seems to be a good person. The point is that, like I was saying last time, some people said that it's so clear that he's not the Mahdi. So when you ask someone, was he the Mahdi? They'll tell you, no, clearly he wasn't the Mahdi, but he was a Mahdi. Like there's such a thing, that there's a Mahdi, there's a Dajjal and all that. Anyways, and the last one that we'll spend our last 5 minutes on, this is something that happened about in 1979, okay? In 1979, someone claimed to be the Mahdi. But if you want to see the story from like, why would young people who were righteous, otherwise they were righteous young men, do something like this? So let's put it this way. There was a young man, his name was Muhammad ibn Abdullah, and he had the aquiline nose, he had this prominent forehead, he looked like the Mahdi, had the name of the Mahdi, I'm not sure about his lineage. And imagine one day, someone just comes to him, this happened, someone comes to him who has never met him before. Says, hey, I saw you in a dream. I saw you in a dream. We were in the Kaaba. We were pledging to you as the Mahdi. It was you. What happens when someone says that to you? You're like, okay, whatever, I don't know. And then a while later, someone else, a complete other stranger who doesn't know you and doesn't know the first guy, comes to you and says the same exact dream. He saw the same exact dream, people pledging to you because you're the Mahdi. Then a third person sees that, who doesn't know the first two. A completely random fourth person says the same thing. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 20 times. What will happen? After a while, you believe. You pledge to yourself you're the Mahdi. So that's one of the things. The shaitan had a role in this, and he brought this dream to a number of people. A number of people had seen that dream, and there was the brains behind the operation, a man by the name of Juhayman ibn Sayf al-Utaybi, who was very convinced that this is the Mahdi, and they had about 200 people, and on an awaited day, this is November 20th, 1979, at Fajr prayer, they entered with some janazas, so the janazas were on the, what is it called? The bier. It's called the bier that you hold the janaza on. And see, in the good old days, things were beautiful and innocent, right? And every time someone does something wrong, new safety measures are put in place and there's more paperwork. Back then, you could just come in with a deceased on a bed and lead the salah and then leave and have the salah led over them, and then now you need certificates and all that. It has to come through channels because of this incident really, where they came in with these janazas, but they were actually not janazas. They were just ammunition and weapons that were covered. He had them covered like that. So after the Fajr prayer, this man Juhayman ibn Sayf al-Utaybi, he got up and he grabbed the microphone and he began to pontificate and give a long lecture about the corruption and the evil and all the things that are happening. And then he says, and I have with me a man who is the Mahdi, and we'll all give pledge to him. Now, the Imam of the Haram was able to sneak out at this point, and then they got up, they brought the Mahdi, which now already doesn't fit the story. All right, it doesn't fit the story that he leaves Medina fleeing to Mecca. That didn't happen. They bring him out of his home and force him to accept the pledge. That also didn't happen. He didn't even have a home in Mecca, and they forced him to accept the pledge, but he wasn't forced to accept it. He wanted the pledge. Why was he there? Why was he part of this 200 people who had this plan? So then they went and they now have the Haram they have snipers on the minarets, and they have weapons, and they have people everywhere. And they trapped like 50,000 people inside the Haram. And they sent the army. So in the beginning it was chaos, people were confused, people weren't sure what was going on. Even some respectable scholars started to think this maybe is the Mahdi, right? And then it took people a while until everyone realized, okay, this is definitely not the Mahdi. So they ordered the army to go in and to basically return, to free the Haram. But the army refused to go. Why? Because they know the hadith of the Mahdi being in the Kaaba. The army is sent to destroy him, and then it's swallowed up when it gets to Bayda. So they refused to go in the beginning. And then after a while, it became clear, these are a bunch of people, young people with weapons, and they're really just bringing fear into people's hearts and destroying the haram and killing innocent people. So it became clear to them this is not the Mahdi, and then they went in with their tanks into the haram, into down those steps, and this took 2 weeks, by the way. 2 weeks they were barricaded in the haram. And so what happened was, then the Juhayman and his people, I'm not going to say the Mahdi, but Juhayman and his people, they went down into the basement of like where they have Zamzam and all that, and they burnt, like they smoked them out with like burnt tires. That's why if you ever see pictures of the captives, they had like black faces with soot on them. Then they flooded that area, they electrocuted it, and they caught, I think, about 60, I can't remember if it was 68 or 63 I think of them were captured alive, including Juhayman himself. But the man who was supposed to be the Mahdi died in the firefight. Some speculate, we will never know for sure, some speculate that Juhayman himself killed him because that man realized, and he was just a righteous young man, but they were all misguided, and he realized that this is not the story of the Mahdi, and maybe wanted to turn himself in. Maybe Juhayman killed him, we don't know, we can't speculate, but the point is that he didn't make it. And then the others, the 63 that were captured, 58 of them were executed in different parts of the kingdom, and then that was the end of that fitna, which became known as Fitnat al-Haram or Fitnat Juhayman. That was a little bit about the Mahdi and a bunch about the false Mahdis, until next time, where we finally get to start with the Dajjal. Sallallahu mubarak ala Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Jazakumullah khairan for your attentive listening. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.